In this video, we will learn about identification, identity management controls, and identity management policies. Identification. Identification is a set of techniques used for carrying out tasks such as identity proofing and creation of a user account in a database. Identity and access management involves identifying, authenticating, and authorizing individuals to have access to systems or networks. The idea behind IAM is to ensure right users have the access to right resources at the right time for the right reasons. Firstly, it begins with the identification process. It identifies the users and then it authenticates if it's really the user trying to access the resources. You can authenticate the user with the passwords, biometrics, or with the use of multi-factor authentication. And then the user will be authorized to access these resources. In the end, based on the user's roles and responsibilities, the account has to be managed. It falls under user management or user accounting. Network administrator. A network administrator is the person designated in an organization whose main responsibility includes maintaining computer infrastructure. It's to maintain the organization's IT infrastructure with the emphasis, with the importance on the local area networks ranging to wide area networks. A network administrator is someone who's responsible for maintaining the server integrity, whereas the user or client is responsible for safeguarding their login credentials. User or the clients are responsible for safeguarding their login credentials such as the username or password from falling into the wrong hands. And the network administrator is responsible for maintaining the server and ensuring that it isn't compromised. This process is carried out with the use of digital certificates and smart cards. Single sign-on authentication. SSO in short is an authentication method that allows users to securely authenticate with multiple applications and websites just by using one set of credentials. The user authenticates their identity to an entity known as the identity provider. And after this identity provider authenticates the user, the identity provider issues a token to this authorized user. The user can use this token as a proof of authentication that I'm in the clear to access this website or applications and log in to avail the services and make use of the resources. Moving on, background verification. Background verification or background check. It's the process of checking an employee or applicant's background to ensure that the candidate is trustworthy before granting access to the system. It's to make sure that the candidate is not hiding any criminal record or any affiliations with threat actors. Usually, background verification is carried out before the candidate is hired into the organization. Onboarding. After a candidate clears the background check, then the organization must decide what resources the employee can access and then allocate the clearance according to the employee's roles and responsibilities. After onboarding, only then the account login credentials or authentication means have to be given to the candidate in a secure manner. At the end of the onboarding process, the employee must also be trained and made aware of the current security policy in place and the rules and compliance requirements in place to lessen the likelihood of an incident by the new employee. Personal policies for privilege management. There are various personal policies in place for managing the employee privileges, and they are as follows. There's a least privilege policy, job rotation policy, and mandatory vacation policy. These policies are in place to make sure that the employee won't be able to abuse their privileges. We'll begin with the least privilege. The idea behind least privilege is to grant the employee the bare minimum number of necessary privileges for an employee to be able to fulfill their responsibilities and nothing more. This way, an employee won't have access to the resources they don't require and it reduces the risk. If an employee were to work in the research and development department, the employee should only have access to the research and development department and not to the accounting department. Moving on, Job rotation. This involves the rotation of duties, roles, and responsibilities to ensure that an employee is not allowed to retain the same role for a long time. This policy is intended to lessen the likelihood of abuse of privileges by an employee. Let's say there are 5 to 6 employees in the information security department, and then one of them is the in charge. He or she is the administrator. Then the organization have to make sure that the administrator isn't in the same role for more than 6 months or so. This way, when the next employee takes over as the administrator, he or she will be able to run a check and see that the previous employee didn't interfere or didn't tamper with the infrastructure. This way, the likelihood of abuse of privileges by an employee is lessened. This is the idea behind the job rotation policy. And lastly, there's the mandatory vacation. The employees are forced to take a vacation or a leave of absence as someone else fulfills the responsibilities that come with the role. It is especially helpful for organizations that require their employees to work at a highly competent level each day. If they are to work continuously without any vacation or so, then it's likely that the employee's performance level goes down. And it isn't ideal in an environment where the employee needs to work at a highly competent level each day. So, employees must take mandatory vacations from time to time to relax. And then there's the offboarding policies. The definition of offboarding is the process of formally separating an employee from the organization they work for as a result of the employee's resignation, termination, or retirement. The purpose of offboarding is to protect the interests of both the employer and the employee that's leaving the organization and to smooth this entire ordeal or transition. A thorough offboarding process has many steps. It includes all of the policies and procedures that need to be followed, so there are no loose ends after an employee leaves. Firstly, there's the exit interview. Exit interviews are used to ensure that the employee departs from the organization in a graceful manner. Exit interviews are meant to collect the feedback from the employee that's leaving the organization and take note of the employee's thoughts before leaving. Before the employee leaves, the employee's privileges have to be revoked and the user account must be disabled or suspended to reduce security risk. To make sure that a threat actor won't be able to use the employee's credentials against the organization. Recovery of company assets. Before letting the employee leave from their organization, the organization must recover the assets it issued, such as the work laptop, mobile devices, smart cards, USB media, and other relevant assets that the organization owns. And then it's the recovery of personal assets. Before letting an employee leave from their organization, the organization should also make sure that the employee is no longer in possession of sensitive data. The employee should also agree and sign contracts to not to disclose any sensitive information with regards to the organization, and that the data with the employee must be deleted.